Hey Flosstube, this is Kim. I'm back again with another cross-stitching weekly update. This is Flosstube number 63, and today is the 6th of April 2020. I worked on 3 different pieces this week. Got a lot of progress done. The overall theme of the week is, it just kind of how it worked out is, how long does it take me to do 1,300 stitches depending on what count fabric and over how many strands, and it was just really interesting to me. So we'll kind of talk about that. Last week I had started working on Four Seasons Salve by Modern Folk Embroidery. Again, my goal for the year is just to finish winter up here. So I started working on that, and I worked on it Monday and Tuesday to have 3 days on it to finish out the month of March. And I thought I'd get more done. I got a little over 1,300 stitches on it in 3 days. I was expecting more, but then going back and looking at my records, this is 1/1 on 28 count Monaco that I dyed myself. Big Red Ship is also 1/1 on 28 count. And I usually do 3-day rotations on that and get about 1,300 stitches. So for 1/1 seems to be 1,300 stitches in 3 days. So there's where I got to. I finished up the reindeer on the top and all the rest of the motifs around him, and then made the rest of the octagon border. And then down here I finished up the bunny rabbit. He needed the rest of his butt in his head, and I also did one more tree over there. So 3-day rotation, 1,300 stitches, not bad. The first time I touched this whip for the year, so hopefully I can get more work into it to finish out that quarter of the design. And then it was the 1st of March, and I told you I was going to work on the Familiar Sal, Catalog of Witches Familiars from Ingleside Imaginarium. And I was right, it was a toad. His name in this catalog is Bufo. And toads are really good for potion making because, as you know, toads and frogs, their skin is kind of wet and slimy. It can absorb liquids. So he can actually absorb some of the potion, hop along to wherever the potion is supposed to be released, and then release it, according to the notes that Brittany gives us. So he was real fun to stitch up. He only took 2 days. Again, just over 1,300 stitches for him and the border of the block beneath him in 2 days. And this is 2/2 on 32 count Lugana in the colorway Murky by Picture This Plus. So let me give you a close-up on Bufo. He's pretty cute for being a toad. Again, this Sal only has 7 colors in the entire design, with 5 of them being DMC. So still really loving this one. It's a good way to start each month to stitch up a different familiar. So there's where I'm at so far on the Familiar Sal. So that was the 1st and the 2nd. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I worked on Supersized Color Expansion Museum Shelf because I had to finish Everglades Park. So I am here on this page with the Stegosaurus in the stone, the T-Rex tail, and then the bottom of this book with a mastodon and some rocks and other stuff over here on the ground. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 3 days. I was average. I did, because, you know, Friday was a school day for my oldest daughter. Saturday I didn't do anything but stitch really and make sure the kids were fed. So I got a lot of stitching on Saturday. And Sunday I did some other things around the house. So I didn't get as many stitches, but it kind of averaged out to 1,300 stitches 10 stitches, and I use 25 count per day. So 1/1 on 28 count is 3 days. 2/2 on 28 or 32 count is 2 days. And for my full coverage pieces, as long as it's not the end of a page where you're changing colors a lot of times, I was getting 1,300 stitches in each day. So I finished up Everglades Park, and that's over 4,100 10 stitches in 3 days. So I chose colors all over the place, picking the most used colors of the page, but they took me all over the place. And I was filling in this bit down here, and that's when I finished the park. So I've got more of this color to go down here, and then it also fills in over the entire page. I am going to work on this more in the month of April, since I'm using this for full coverage fanatics around the world. In April, we're visiting Egypt, and hello, there's a whole corner on Egypt. So that's my piece for Egypt. So I will start, let's see, Trick or Treat is going to go towards Hawaiian volcanoes to finish tier 5. And so for tier 3, we'll finish tier 2. And then for tier 3, the first one will be this one. And I just forgot what it was. And I don't have my list here. Joshua Tree? Yeah, Joshua Tree. So this, I will work on it again later this month for Joshua Tree National Park. So that's where I'm leaving it for now. This week I am going to work on Macintosh Mill, because for Glacier National Park in Tier 2, that is my only park remaining, and I have it over halfway done on Macintosh Mill, so I got to finish that park so I can call Tier 2 complete and get my monthly stitches on Macintosh Mill for 2020. And then I'll probably do my 1 day's worth of work on Templar Prophecy by Long Dog Samplers this week. And then I'm thinking I'll pull out a non-full coverage that I haven't worked on yet this year. There's a few of them that I haven't worked on. There's Joan Elliott's Roly Polies, that's Mr. and Mrs. Claus on perforated paper. There's the Santa Sampler by Cooler Design Studios. Witchy Tea Time by Primitive Hair. Which other ones haven't I touched this year? Let me look real quick. That's non-full coverage. Yeah. Those are the only 3 I haven't touched that are non-full coverage. But then I also want to work in my charting software and try to finish up the zoo animals / safari animals piece for my friend. So we'll see what this week brings. Another week of self-quarantine. Yeah. So that's all my stitchy content. It was real quick this week, apparently. I'm only at 9 minutes. So the rest is Air Force stories. So if you're not sticking around for that, I'll see you next week. Air Force stories. I talked to you last week about my job at Luke Air Force Base as the detachment commander of the 372nd Training Squadron Detachment 12. So largest fighter aircraft field training detachment in the Air Force. So we're providing 41 courses to maintainers at the base, along with the Mission Ready Airman program. And I wanted to explain a little bit more about what that Mission Ready Airman program consists of. So if you're enlisted in the Air Force, you go through basic training, you finish that, you get your career field, and you find out you're going to be an F-16 crew chief. Well, then you're going to go to Shepherd Air Force Base in Wichita Falls, Texas. I think it's at least 4 months, where you're working and learning about the F-16 on non-operational airplanes and in the classroom at Shepherd. So you're still being able to touch everything, go out to an active flight line. So, I mean, the flight line is still protected, and there's rules that you have to abide by to go out on the flight line. But the non-operational airplanes are in a different section as the operational T-38s that are at Shepherd. So they spend 4 months there, and then they come to Luke Air Force Base outside Phoenix. Now, these are still probationary airmen, you could say. Like I said, if you think about any craziness that you went through after high school, whether you went to college or not, you know, you're not even 20 years old yet. You're trying to figure out what life is like. You're out of your parents' home for the first time in your life. These kids, and I'll call them kids because they're still trying to get used to the outside world, and that's why they're kind of probationary airmen. Their rank, they're either airmen, which is one stripe on their sleeve, or there might have been was there any A1Cs? Airman First Class? I don't think so. I think they're all Airman Basic, which is no stripes, a slick sleeve, and one stripe airman. So they all lived in our dorm. That was part of our responsibility. And in our dorm worked our 3 MTLs, military training leaders. So these are non-commissioned officers, staff sergeants and tech sergeant, and one tech sergeant. And for the 3 years that I was in charge of the DET, there's always a mix of males and female MTLs, because you need to have both, because the crew chiefs coming through are both males and females. The dorm rooms in the dorms are 2 rooms sharing 1 bathroom. And of course, we had all the females in a different part of the building that I think was it 2 floors? Yeah, 2 stories tall, and the females were in like one wing of the building next to where the MTL's offices were, and then the males were the rest of the building. So obviously the females were never sharing a room with a male. And I always had at least 1 female MTL. And so these MTLs, they could be from any career field. They didn't even have to be maintenance. I had weapons. I had a dental assistant. So the kind of person that cleans your teeth. She was an MTL. I had, crew chiefs. So it didn't have to be maintenance. And to be an instructor or an MTL in the detachment, it's not just luck of the draw. You have to apply for the job and be interviewed and be hired. So because it's a 3-year controlled tour, which means you're mine for 3 years, you're not deploying with any of the units out of Luke Air Force Base. You're here. Because Luke Air Force Base belongs to Air Combat Command, and then our detachment, as part of the squadron at Shepherd, belongs to Air Education and Training Command. So it's, even though we're geographically at the same base, we're part of 2 different commands in the Air Force. So they would come over from the operational side of Luke, and they were mine for 3 years. But that also means I was getting the cream of the crop, because my senior master sergeant and I could interviewed everyone, and we always had multiple applicants for each job, whether it was an MTL or a crew chief instructor, weapons instructor, engines instructor. We would put the ad out there, if you will, to the maintenance group at Luke, and then people would come and interview with us. We would get the records, so it would be based on their records, a recommendation from their squadron commander, and how they did in the interview. And then they were mine for 3 years to take care of. But just to say that the people that we hired were always, top of their field. Didn't need any micromanaging, only needed me to bounce ideas off of and help them arrive to the correct solution to their problem, if you will. So I had 3 MTLs watching the airmen at the dorm, and then they would go to class, and they would march to class. Each class, I think, was about 14 students, and they would they were in charge. They had like student leaders, if you will, that would wear ropes, different colored ropes, to show that they were a student leader, and they would march from the dorm to the class. They weren't driving, and go to class. If they needed to get to the flight line, I think they walked or marched then too, because we didn't have any unit vehicles for the students to use. And so they'd have classroom in the crew chief building, and then go out to the flight line and work on launching jets, catching jets, servicing the airplanes, doing basic pre-flight inspections, post-flight inspections. And so each class of, say, 14 students had 2 instructors. So once they went out to the flight line, they would split up. I think it might have only been 12. So it was a 1 to 6 ratio. They would split up, and each instructor would take a certain number of students. And as they were launching jets, instead of one comm cord going from the jet to one crew chief, they'd have what we call a Y cord. So it would come from the airplane and then split into 2, so the instructor could also be on the headset, hearing how the student was communicating with the air crew in the jet and launching the jet out. Let's see. So because they're probationary airmen, they were doing stupid stuff. We would do dorm inspections. I think we did dorm inspections about once a quarter, at night after curfew. Me and instructors would show up in uniform in our BDUs, and a whole lot of yelling. All right, everybody, get out. Let's go. Dorm inspection. And we look for things they shouldn't have. Whether it was prescription pills that may not have been in their original bottles. That's important. Any weapons, any drug paraphernalia, anything they shouldn't have. Also making sure they're keeping their room in a neat and orderly fashion. And then we'd do a little formation in the parking lot of the dorm afterwards and talk to them and brief them on certain things they need to work on. Like if we found cigarette butts in the stairwell, because it's an exterior stairwell, and you're not supposed to smoke within 50 feet of any building on an Air Force base. So if we'd find cigarette butts, or if the laundry room in the dorm was a disaster, we'd, be talking about that. So it's kind of like basic training, but not as strict, because these students are still learning. Every Friday we'd have final formation. So that was mostly for the purpose of the MRA students, who would be standing up in formation, and then the rest of my instructors would also be in formation, just to share announcements and events, things that are going on, any critical information, and brief them on anything. And we'd sing the Air Force song at the end, and it'd be the end. It'd be like a weekly dismissal. Okay, now it's the weekend. Don't be idiots. That kind of thing. And I had some idiots. Now, as a detachment commander, because I was geographically separated from my squadron commander, I had what's called G series orders. So I had special permission where I could sign any paperwork that came through that usually required a squadron commander signature. That also meant that I could do disciplinary actions, and it was mostly disciplinary actions on the MRA students, because, as I said, my instructors were cream of the crop. I didn't really have to worry about them, and my MTLs as well. So I will talk at a later time about the stupidity of some of the MRA stupid things they've done and the experiences I had there. Let's see. So they stayed with us about a month each class. And I think the peak year we had over 750 MRA students coming through in 1 year. And my senior master sergeant and I would attend every single graduation, as well as the maintenance group commander at Luke Air Force Base or his deputy would also attend the graduation of these new crew chiefs before they would PCS. Some of them would stay at Luke, but then they would PCS to F-16 bases across the world, because once they graduated our class, they are a 3-level. So your basic airman maintainer, they're allowed to go out there and work on airplanes. So that's kind of like, we're like the last step before we release them out into the world. At different F-16 bases, including bases in including bases in Europe and Korea. We have some F-16 bases in Korea. So it was always interesting to try to. Each class is slightly different, and my instructors were smart enough to, follow the curriculum as to what they should be working on each day. But if each class had some slackers or students who just weren't understanding, then they could take extra time and wiggle some room into that curriculum. And sometimes they would speed a class up, and sometimes they'd hold a class and slow them down. So one fun thing I'm going to show you at one of our detachment Christmas parties that was for instructors only. So just like I had about 50 instructors. It was in one of our buildings, and of course the instructors, being maintainers, they do silly things. A lot of the crew chiefs, they would go to thrift stores and dress up in their 1970s finest attire. So leisure suits and things like that was really funny. And then through the Christmas party and exchanging door prizes and stuff, there was always some buffoonery and stuff going on as well. Well, one year, one of the instructor spouses won a door prize, which just happened to be an envelope. So you thought, hey, there's going to be money in it, right? And she starts opening the envelope, and it looks like a $100 bill is inside the envelope, until she pulls it out the rest of the way. And I had no idea the guys were doing this. Holland bucks is what they called it. They somehow photoshopped my face from my official bio onto the dollar bill. Of course, I've folded this and I've kept this for a while. So that's 100 Holland bucks for you. It was funny, but of course she didn't think it was funny. Yeah, so a couple people got Holland bucks in their little door prize. It was entertaining. That was by far my best assignment, and my fondest memories are leading the detachment, because I worked with a great bunch of people. They worked for me, but I worked with them, is how I look at it, even though they were all enlisted and lower ranking than me, and they called me ma'am and captain, but I'm still Facebook friends with a lot of them and we keep track of each other. So more stories from the DET unit, future weeks. Everybody have a good stitching week. Get some good progress in. Try not to go stir crazy. And I will talk to you next week. Bye, guys.